Hello, everybody. John Riley and I have known each other for quite a while, back in New York through many iterations or epochs of stuff. And I'm really happy that we'll be able to hang here and talk and mess around on the drums. So, John, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Nice to see you. I'm glad we got the technical glitches worked out.
I have a couple of questions. I just want to kind of get into it and see what's happening. Basically, I think from the standpoint of like a young musician who sort of wants to get into playing music more at a professional level, or for older people who want to just improve their drumming. So that's kind of what I was thinking we would get into. And first of all, I wanted to ask, when did you know that you wanted to be a professional drummer, John?
I guess when I was in my middle teens, I'd been playing in some rock bands, like from the time I was 14, 15 years old, with older musicians, actually. My father really wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that.
Mine too, yeah.
Yeah. I thought, well, if I'm not going to be a musician, maybe I'll be a veterinarian. I convinced him to let me study music in college.
Oh.
And so that was sort of a turning point. He had a funny thought, though, that he thought if I was a failure as a musician, that having a degree in classical percussion would have more value in the real world than having a degree in jazz. So he pushed me to become a classical percussion major in school.
Mm-hmm.
But after 2 years, I switched my major to jazz. And I went to school at North Texas.
Oh, great. Yeah, I hear it's such a great school.
Well, it's a huge school.
So
there were like 150 drummers there when I was there.
Oh, God help us. Yeah. There's something like that at Berkeley, too. I also teach. I can't believe that many. It was over 100. And I was like, holy crow, who are these people, But that's a good point right there. How are we all going to make a living? Where are these guys going to go? And these women are sort of really coming on strong. So supposing somebody comes to you and says, well, I want to become a professional musician. I want to play jazz. What would you advise them to do?
Well, I would give them the advice that many people gave me and that I've heard said many times. If you think you have another option, do that. If music is the thing that you love more than anything else and you can't see yourself being happy without it, then go for it. But if you're on the fence, life as a musician, I've had the benefit of a lot of good opportunities in my life. The career of a musician can be tough. If you're playing gigs that aren't thrilling you and you're making low money, that's pretty depressing. If you're playing gigs that you love and you're making low money, that's another story.
Right.
I think to be successful, you have to be on a mission to do this thing, whether anybody supports you or not. It just has to be the thing that you have to do.
That's great advice. Yeah. I mean, you have to be all out. You have to have a dream and you have to say, I don't care, what people think. You may get support, you may not get support, but if that's what you really want to do, that's what's going to make you happy. Then, I've seen people that have wanted to do that, but then they've sort of veered off the path and gone to make some more money, and then they want to come back and they want to learn music. It's like that was their passion, and it's sort of too bad that they didn't follow it. When I grew up in sort of early, my brother brought home "Ain't That a Shame" by Fats Domino, and I think I played that a zillion times. I didn't know at the time Earl Palmer was on drums. That just got me, and then I got a little practice pad and started working on that, and then I got into a doo-wop band, basically. I went through high school, got into bands, and then I went to college, and that was the most fun I ever had was playing, and I was just passionate about it. So when I got the chance, then I started studying with people. I went to New York. First of all, I studied with Jim Strasberg, who I think you probably remember. I haven't seen him in a long time. He's kind of faded out, but he played with Sly Stone, and we were roommates out here in California for a while. But then I went in and studied with Sonny Igo. I studied with Henry Adler. I studied with Bernard Purdy, which was an amazing experience. And then I took about 4 lessons with Philly Joe Jones, which was really cool. Picked up a few things here and there, and kind of that's how I did it. Who did you study with, John?
When I was a kid, I got a snare drum for Christmas. And I used to play just that snare drum along with a radio. I guess I was making a lot of racket, and my parents thought, well, if he's going to keep doing that, maybe he should take some lessons so it sounds a little better. And so from, I guess, the age 9 until 15, I studied with a fellow named Tom Sokola. When I began studying with him, he was 19 years old, and he was a student at the Manhattan School of Music. And one of his classmates was Steve Gadd.
Oh, far out.
Nobody knew who Steve Gadd was when he was a freshman in college. And then it got to the point where my teacher, Tom, said, you know, I think I've taken you about as far as I can. You should maybe look for another teacher. I took lessons from a couple of guys I didn't really connect with. It turns out one of the guys I took a lesson with who sort of frightened me with his sternness was Billy Cobham.
No kidding. Wow.
2 lessons from him when I was about 15 or 16.
Wow.
And we just played on Remo pads. He was so insistent on a certain kind of precision.
I had a student who went through Berkeley and did my School of Funk as well. He just recently took a lesson from Billy Cobham. Billy's in Switzerland. They did it, online and everything. And he said the exact same thing, that he put like a little quarter in the middle of the snare drum, and said you have to hit that every time. It was exactly what you're saying, and I don't know, he got through it. I don't know if he was wild about it, but I guess he learned some stuff.
I think there's a lot of value, and Billy is certainly
amazing,
a consummate professional and an inspiring person. I just wasn't ready for that focus on that specific thing at that time.
What books did you use before you wrote your own books? And I wanted to, of course, mention.
Well, I used a lot of books.
This is, if you haven't seen John's opus here, which is a total classic that I use with my students. It's a great book. And I just want to mention, not only is it a great book as far as the exercises, and he really gives credit to all the great drummers, Max Roach. And in the back, there's like a discography of what you should be listening to, Roy Haynes, Philly Joe Jones, and he has the actual records to go to. So it's really a treasure of stuff. And then he's got Beyond Bop Drumming, which is, even further beyond bop drumming. And that's another great one too. And again, lots of examples in the back of stuff to check out. But what books did you get into when you were starting out?
Before I do that, let me tell you a funny story. You just showed that picture of Max Roach in The Art of Bop Drumming. And I gave Roy Haynes a copy of the book, and he folds through the pages and he comes to that page and he looks at it and he says, you know what? I still have that suit. That was the suit that Charlie Parker made his sidemen buy. And he said, Charlie Parker told him, you have to go to a particular tailor and have this suit made. And Roy said, I still have the Charlie Parker uniform suit, which was the one that Max was wearing in that picture.
That's crazy, man. Wow. I didn't know they were into wardrobe back then,
My first teacher had me working on snare drum stuff. The Haskell Haar books.
When I studied with Bernard Purdy, that's the book he gave me up on Columbus Circle and put me upstairs, and he gave me that book and he said, play the book, but don't play the book. I mean, don't play the beats that are written there. Play some kind of rock thing, but follow the chart and use the dynamics and the stops and read music that way, And then he'd go downstairs and talk to people and blah, 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 And then about half an hour later, he'd come up and he'd say, well, what did you do? So then I'd play a little bit for him, and that's how that red book, right?
Yeah, the red book. And there was a book by Gene Krupa and Cozy Cole, I think, that I worked through. And those were like snare drum reading books.
Ah, okay.
And then the Chapin book. And there was a book by Sam Ulano. I think it was called Bass Bops. It was sort of snare drum and bass drum comping against the swing.
Cool.
Beat. Earlier, you made me think about the first time I played a song with a band.
Okay.
I was listening a lot to Ringo, and my teacher had taught me the rock beat a certain way. But the first song I played with the band was this Cream song, Sunshine of Your Love. And I played that beat. The guitar player said, no, you're playing it wrong. And I said, what do you mean I'm playing it wrong? Well, actually, on that record, Ginger Baker plays the snare drum on 1 and 3 instead of on 2 and 4.
Oh, yeah, right.
He plays the 8th notes on the floor tom, and he plays the snare drum on 1 and 3. So it's like, boop, 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 beta, a wanna do bop.
Yeah. Play that for us on the drum set. Just see if we can get that happening where we play a little bit. It's like the Indian beat.
Yeah, exactly. No. Instead of.
Okay. Right.
So it's like backwards rock.
So that's it. That's Ginger Baker, all right. He was a crazy dude. I interviewed the whole Cream at one time, and that was far out. He was amazing. Let's put it that way. And he had a lot of drums, and the drum companies must really love him. And he's played a lot, and those guys were amazing.
You can learn things from books, but you really need to refer to the recordings to see how this goes, and to get the feeling and the flow of the music. The books are great for information, and then you want to confirm that information by
Good
listening
point.
to
Very good point.
the main guys.
I started out in a rock band, and the day I got my drums, we opened up the drums and started playing with the band, you know. So I didn't know diddly. They didn't know anything either. So it was like, it worked out fine. And I'd learned by just listening to records and playing the right hand on the side of the practice pad and the snare drum in the middle of the practice pad. So I had a little bit of an idea. I listened and played in a bunch of bands before I ever opened a book, you know. But then I wanted to be a pro, so I knew I had to get my hands together, and I knew I had to learn how to read. So that's when I really got into it. But at that point, then it was like I used the Buddy Rich book, the Rudiment book with Henry Adler and Sonny Igo. And Stick Control was always around. There weren't many books on funk, that's for sure. I mean, I wrote one of them. Then I, got into transcribing music and how to write the drum beats and stuff like that. And I use that in my school of funk, and that is how to transcribe a beat. Because I think it's important to learn how to transcribe a beat. Then you sort of set the other side of the picture. If you have to listen to think out, where is that bass drum? Is it on the of two, or is it on the and of two? Then you start to get more organized and more sort of able to construct your own grooves. So I think it's sort of two sides of the picture. Your point is well taken, that you can learn snare drum stuff and all that. How can you learn how to play like Roy Haynes? I mean, it's like you got to listen and sort of get a smattering of the idea of what he's doing, and then you can get some stuff happening. I did study with Philly Joe Jones, and he used this book, Charles Wilcoxon, Swinging Solos, or something like Rudimentary Solos, this one of my treasured items, which is around here in my library.
Rudimental swing solos.
That was it. And he just took me down. He said, now we go through this page, and it was all these rudiments and with accents and stuff, and it was a hip, But his thing was like, okay, there's a whole page of this stuff. That's a lesson for today. Now come back when you have it memorized. And I was like, what? I never memorized anything. Did memorize some stuff. Songs you have to know, but that was a real killer because he was teaching me two things. At one point, Thad Jones and Mel Lewis became the Vanguard Orchestra. You told me you had memorized the book. And I was like, how could you do that? Why did you do that? How long did it take?
I didn't have a timetable. When I was a freshman in college, the guest artists with the college big band were Thad Jones and Mel Lewis.
Oh,
now,
cool.
I wasn't good enough to be in that band, but I observed the concert. And after they left their music in the library of North Texas. This was in 1972. So the early Thad Jones arrangements from up to that period became standard repertoire among the students in the big bands in that school. A number of those things I'd been playing for 10, 15 years before I ever really played with the band. And that was, I guess, 6 or 8 charts. So the classics, Big Dipper, Little Pixie, Tiptoe, Groove Merchant, those charts. When I started playing with the band regularly, I started subbing for Mel, I think in 87. He passed away in 90 or 91. Then when I started playing with the band regularly, some of the music I knew very well, some of it I knew peripherally. But what I found was that after being in the band for a couple of years, now the library is about 300 songs.
Holy crow.
After being in the band for a couple of years, I found that when I looked at the music, it made me approach it in a similar way every time. And I was starting to get bored with the way I was approaching the music. I just made a decision. I took a gamble. I said to myself, well, I think I know this music well enough to not look at the parts. Even if I make a mistake, nothing is going to be a train wreck. What happened was that was so liberating to be able to play that music without looking at it and having the sight of the music make me play in a reflexive way. But when I put the music away, I started playing with the sound of what I was hearing. It kind of transformed itself from feeling like I was playing with a big band to feeling like I was playing with 15 Sonny Rollinses all at once.
Wow,
and everything was like comping for that.
That's great. That's great.
And I think that change that I made allowed me to bring a new kind of energy and creativity and vitality to that music that was informed by the tradition.
Sure.
And, those songs were written with the idea of Mel Lewis playing them. And he had a beautiful concept. And my idea wasn't to take anything away from that, was to honor that, but to see how it could be expanded. I'm happy that the band had the patience and the trust in me to allow that process to come to fruition.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't had a gig since last March, but we're going to start up again in September at the Vanguard. We just got word of that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. All right.
It'll be interesting to see what happens on the first couple of nights back.
Don't think about it. It'll happen.
Well, I want it to sound good.
Are you going to practice beforehand? Are you going to go through the tunes?
I've been playing 2 or 3 hours every day during the whole
I was going to ask that too. What have you been doing during the pandemic, and what are you practicing?
Well, I've got this book, and I write down little phrases that intrigue me,
right,
and see how I can develop them.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way that I practice. And there's pages and pages of stuff. And I started this the beginning of this year. On some pages, you can see arrows like this one connects really nicely over here. This one, oh, it looks like it starts here, but it's even better if you make this beat 1. By playing these things almost every day, I discover a modification of some of these things or some new idea to add to the collection of things that I'm working on. There's a couple of books that I have been kind of messing with.
Yeah, which ones?
One is an old book by Ralph Humphrey called Even in the Odds, which is all odd tempo, odd time signature stuff. But I've been changing it from the way it was originally written, adding different ostinatos to it and trying to feel the phrases in different ways. And that's been really challenging and fun.
I was sort of doing the same thing in a way. I come up with something that I like. For instance, between the hi-hat and the snare drum, I'm trying to get these like 3 lefts in a row and accent that middle one. And then add the bass drum. Clyde Stubblefield had this beat, and he was doing those 3 in a row with the accent in the middle, which is always challenging. Something like. And I always liked that. And of course, today you can play it. Take your right hand off and just play it. And of course, a lot of people are doing a lot of that today. I'm sort of a, more traditional with one hand on the hi-hat. There's all sorts of possibilities with that. Why not? Because when you're playing that, it's like linear-wise, you don't have to play the hi-hat at the same time. That was Ringo. We're back to Ringo. Oh, yeah.
Or Charlie Watts.
Yeah, or Charlie Watts. So you don't have to play all like that. The whole linear thing, which is... lots of stuff you can do with just one surface. Listening to Mike Clark and to David Garibaldi. He had a great interview just a couple of days ago on Facebook. Garibaldi was getting the whole linear thing together, and I think that's kind of as far as funk has gotten. It's gone back and forth, but the linear thing is a lot of fun. You were talking about, in your book, groupings of 3. Your books are available on Amazon. Mine are also available on my website, which is just funkydrummer.com. Little plug here, and this is my Give the Drummer Some I've had out for quite a while. This is also available on Amazon and on my website. In your book, you're talking about 3-beat phrases. And I wanted to get into the idea of jazz. Certain 3-beat phrases, it's the same thing in funk, really. Like if you're playing a beat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. There's a lot of similarities. You're sort of known as a jazz drummer, and I'm sort of known as a funk drummer, but I play jazz too, I think they're a lot more similar than people think, because all the independence that you get playing jazz, you can do the same thing in a funk bag. And the other thing that's very interesting to me is that, with the jazz feel, you've got like triplets, 1 triplet, 2 triplets. But if you just flatten it out, instead of you've changed the triplet feel down to the 16th note feel, and you've really done the same thing. And in fact, I don't know if you know Vince Laudiano, he says, well, your funk sounds really swingy, which it does. I'm not like... It's a little bit halfway in between.
Yeah, I think it comes from the spacing of the notes, but also the way you accent. There's sort of a contour to the phrasing that isn't quantized.
The quantization can really screw it up. It's like another older drummer was talking about that. He says the body doesn't work that way. The heart has a certain thing, and you have this body motion, which is something that I work on a lot with my students. We play to a metronome to make sure we can do it like that, but I remember Chris Parker once told me, the great drummer in New York, he said, this was after the whole disco thing and all that, he said, I don't know, go to sessions and I just can't get that damn metronome out of my ear, because he had to play to this all the time. That was it. And that can be really limiting. It's a challenge, because some people can play to a metronome and sound good, put it in their head and still sound like a real person,
Well, Mel Lewis said an interesting thing. He did a lot of studio work in the 60s and early 70s until the next generation of GAD, and he played a lot with click tracks. He said, try to think of the click track just as if it's like a percussionist. Sometimes you're exactly with the percussionist, and sometimes you guys are drifting apart, and don't get nervous when it drifts apart, but ease it back in. That sort of made the process a little less stressful.
Yeah, I like that approach.
One thing you make me think about with those 3 notes in the left hand.
Yeah.
If you just practice flam taps,
so
you get 3 notes in the left hand. It sounds like this.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, so each hand has 3 notes, right? So it would be.
Wow, that's cool.
A South American groove, I think it might be called candomblé, which has this sort of flam taps starting on the upbeat instead of if the bass comes here, then
yeah. That is cool. I like that.
The hi-hat plays clave, and the bass drum plays. Played this in ages. Kind of a nice groove.
I don't know if you remember, but I was in a group called Slickophonics. I know you remember, but
Absolutely.
I was in that group for 5 years of touring, and you came to one of our first gigs at a place called the Botany Talk House on 6th Avenue in New York.
Wow. I don't remember that place.
We're just getting started, and I don't know, it seemed like you had some curiosity about funk. I loaned you my Meters record.
Do I still have it?
No, I got it back, but it took a couple of years. I was curious, so you got into funk as well.
I started out playing rock. Then I heard Gene Krupa, studied with Joe Morello, and he was a fantastic teacher that I could speak about for hours.
Yes.
And at the same time I was studying with Joe Morello, I was actually introduced to Mahavishnu Orchestra and Billy Cobham and this sort of fusion thing.
Right.
And then somebody introduced me to Tower of Power.
I see, okay.
And so I kind of learned about funk from Garibaldi rather than from Purdy and Earl Palmer and those guys. I guess unless you're Louis Armstrong, who kind of heard the evolution of music, everybody starts someplace. People look back to a certain degree or to a great degree. And so my introduction to funk was kind of through Garibaldi. And then checking out Greg Arico.
Right.
And Michael Shreve.
All those
and
guys from
then
California, yeah.
and then Purdy. And what
Right.
was that other guy's name? Gaylord Birch was
Right.
great.
He was a bad dude, man. Yeah, we all kind of jump in along the path of it and go from there, or go back from there and then come back up to it. I wanted to just give a shout out to my sponsors who have helped me for many years. Peisty Cymbals, DW Drums, a great drum set. Fader Sticks, and Remo, of course. Everybody's got Remo heads. They got his head for every possibility. So those guys, thank you very much. You've really supported me over the years, and I do appreciate that.
They provide instruments that really draw me to want to play them. There's something to that. If you like the way your instrument sounds, well, let me put it the other way. If you don't like the way your instrument sounds, you're less likely to practice. But if you love the way it sounds and then it's calling you to come play me. So you want to have an instrument that you're happy with. And for me, this Yamaha drums, Zildjian cymbals with Remo heads, they work in every kind of situation. I'm very happy that they support the things that I do.
One thing I wanted to think about and get into a little bit. So we got this idea of why do you want to be a professional drummer. So you have to have, first of all, you have to have that passion, like you were saying, that this is the only thing that's really going to make you happy. And you're going to have to get into it, go through some hard times. I know, I just heard, where was that I heard? Oh, it was Garibaldi who was saying interview he did with this guy, Mike Doolbear. We think it's difficult now to make it as a musician. It's always the same. Like, for instance, in the Renaissance, way back in art, Rubens and all these people, they had just as hard a time getting their thing together as we have getting our thing together. You don't want to think, oh man, the times are bad, it's not going to work out. You've got to go for it. And that's number one. And number two, you got to study and get the technique that you want. And then you got to get a gig, So a lot of people playing in their basement, and the old saying was, they're waiting for Miles to call them up, or they think somebody's going to go by the street and hear them play and hire them. That's not it. You got to get out there. And now that the pandemic is over, you can get out there more. And of course, you can get out there online, which everybody's doing all the time now. You got to find people that are in your bag. Now, when we did the Slickophonics, there was a jam session up near Times Square where I was living. Every Monday night, there was a jam session. Patience Higgins was doing it. And I went there every Monday night, and I met a ton of people, and eventually they kind of filtered down to, Ray Anderson, Steve Elson, Al Jaffe, and Mark Elias. Then I didn't know Al, and they said, well, let's get Al in the group, and blah, blah, and it clicked. But you got to be out there, and you've got to go to jam sessions, go to everyone you can. That was, Will Lee told me that, when I first came to New York. It was like, how are you going to do this? Go to every jam session you possibly can. You might not click with every person, even though you're on a similar level. But eventually you'll find a group that works together, and then you'll be happening. So I was trying to put together sort of a little program for younger people who want to follow that passion. I don't know, John, do you have any pointers on how that's done?
Well, maybe the times have changed a little bit, but I got some advice when I was young, and this older musician named Marvin Stamm, trumpet player, played on 1 million record dates in New York. He said to me, focus on the music, the business side of it will take care of itself. He said, if you focus on the business, all you'll get is the business.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, what can I control? I can control if I practice today or not.
Yeah,
I can control if that band leader says, your bossa nova sounds a little funny to me. Well, I can control whether I work on that or not.
Right.
These are the things I can control. And then to follow up on what you were saying, you want to be visible enough so that you have the possibility to meet people that you find some kind of sympathetic musical vibes with.
Right.
And there's 1 million really strong players that don't necessarily feel comfortable with each other. There's little groups that seem to keep forming because they enjoy playing together. But you want to find the people that you're meant to play with. You want to find a door that opens for you. Because it's not just about playing great. It's about being prepared at the right time, having the right people aware of your competency, gaining their trust somehow. That's really, since we're such a support instrument, we want the other players to trust us and to trust our sense of groove, to trust our musical instincts, to trust our sense of dynamics, to trust the leadership component that we bring to the music, and to trust that we're reliable, that we're going to be on the gig at time with the right clothes on and all of those
Right.
things.
Right. All that too.
If you want to play, you have to take all these other things into account. It's not just about being a little faster than Buddy Rich. Anyway, good luck with that.
Yeah. Sonny Igo, who I studied with, Tommy Igo's dad, super fast, and he played on all these TV shows in New York on staff, CBS and NBC, an amazing drummer. And one of his mantras was, practice slow to play fast. That is it. When you're playing funk, you got to have that bass drum, right? And so to practice that, relax, relax, relax. And the same with the hand. That's the first thing. And the second thing that you brought to mind was the great drummer Roger Hawkins just passed away about 2 days ago, who played on a bunch of Aretha Franklin tunes and all sorts of stuff down at the Fame Studios in Sheffield, Alabama. I went down there and met him and interviewed him for my book, which is Give the Drummer Some. He's in here along with 25 other drummers of that hit makers and stuff. Great obituary for him in the New York Times. But he said, in terms of drummers, what advice could I give? You know, a lot of drummers think that there's a space in the music. It's time to play really fast and show off. His thing was, if I could teach drummers anything, it would be to listen to the music. That was the most important thing. And he didn't read music. None of those guys did. Same thing in Stax. And I went down to Stax and talked to those guys. And Steve Cropper said, we have head arrangements. And well, what's that? You know, he said, we just play it and learn it. You know, we just figure it out. In terms of funk and R&B, that's kind of the best way to do it in a way. And just to get together and get a groove and then add to it. That's what we did with the JB horns. I mean, we would get a groove, and before you know it, they had a horn line that went with it, and somebody said, well, let's go to this chord, and then there's a break, and you have a tune, you know. Roger Hawkins played on so many hits, and I was lucky to hang out with him for one afternoon, and we went to a car dealership. He wanted wide white wall tires for his Buick Riviera. And he wanted to make sure that they had come in, you know. I always treasure that afternoon memory. So what we're talking about, first of all, you got to be prepared, you know. You got to be prepared for the gig you're going to. You got to show up on time, and you got to show up an hour early. You know, if you're the drummer, you know, you got to set up, and you know, you got to look good, and you got to be amenable and fun to play with, you know, fun to hang with. So when you find something you need to do, you got to do that. Get it ready so you're complete. You can play any kind of gig, you know. Now, some gigs, you start out, you're playing rock and roll gigs, or you're playing whatever, weddings, whatever it is, you're making money. You got to do some of that so you can get into a group that you like, and you guys go on and then go for it, make some original music. So it's a whole kind of a process, but follow the dream, you know, and do it. I mean, that's it. Don't give up.
Yeah, I played 1 million weddings and bar mitzvahs, and some of them were dreadful. And others, I met somebody that I really connected with,
Right.
Musically and personally. So you never know who's going to be on the bandstand or who's going to be in the audience. And that's why you want to be prepared. You want to play with the right attitude, with the right energy, because opportunities don't come around that often. And you may be in a situation where Quincy Jones happens to be in the audience.
Yeah.
And if you sound tired, well, he's not going to come and talk to you.
Right.
So that's it. You want to, like, we're the engine of the band. We need to bring vitality to the music.
Right.
And we need to lift everybody else up. That's the energy. It's not chaotic. It's not a panic, but it's the sort of forward momentum we need to put into the music to make it feel like it must be. Yeah. Right? When it sounds tired, then it's a problem for the other musicians. It's a problem for the listeners, and it doesn't lead to good opportunities.
Right.
One other thing you mentioned about practicing slowly, I remember Joe Morello was a student of George Lawrence Stone.
It's stick
And George
control.
Lawrence Stone, the guy who wrote Stick Control, he created this thing he called Stone's Formula. And Stone's formula was accuracy plus endurance equals speed. As simple as that.
Accuracy, yeah. Really know what you're doing. Yeah, I mean, I've been playing, warming up, getting stuff, rudiments and all that happen. And I realize I'm not really thinking about my fingers are making the sound. It's not the end of the stick. John Ramsey taught me that in one lesson at a basic thing. I said, well, what happens when you get really soft? He said, well, you got to actually hold on a little bit tighter. But it got me going thinking about my grip. And I was always thinking the end of the stick is doing the work, but it's your fingers that are doing the work.
But it's the ears that are directing the fingers.
Right. That's right. You got to hear it. It's got to make the sound that you want it to make. Well, I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and I've had a great time. We can wrap it up here, and who knows, maybe we could do another one.
Well, it's great to see you, Jim, and to see that you're helping young drummers and old drummers become more aware of what's important. So thank you for continuing on that mission. Hey, I was thinking earlier about a tagline for your drum lessons.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, maybe somebody mentioned this to you 50 years ago, but it could be no pain, no gain.
All right. I'm going to use that. Just put my name in there, why not? I mean, I've been working really hard with my School of Funk, and that's coming along really well. If you go to my website, funkydrummer.com, you can find out all about it. John, if somebody wants to get in touch with you or, study with you, are you open to them? How would they do that?
Shoot me an email at john@johnriley.org. I've been giving Zoom lessons to... I have some students in China, some students in Israel.
Yeah, I do too. Amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
In South America, in Italy. It works well, either via Zoom or FaceTime or Skype. Right. All those formats work pretty well.
Okay, john@johnriley.org. Now, we have a few people who came on. I just want to say hi to Ken Murphy, my buddy out there. What does he say? Would like to hear what John thought about Jim Chapin's interrupting his PASIC clinic. Not sure what year, but... Jim actually got up and played. I'm not quite sure what that's all about.
Clinic at PASIC, and Jim was in the audience, as he often was, in the front row, checking everybody out.
Yeah.
Super supportive man, and incredibly enthusiastic about drumming and about helping other drummers play better. And I was talking about a particular subject, and he presented a slightly different way to think about it that opened my ears up and I think was a nice addition to the workshop. It was a little bit strange for him to be so aggressive. I mean, not aggressive in a bad way, but so forward. But I was happy for his input. Jim was always so enthusiastic. And
he was amazingly enthusiastic. He couldn't stop playing. He was amazing.
He was a good guy.
I got a little shout out from my buddy Emil Switzer in New York, who was a district leader in my Buddhist group. We practice SGI Buddhism. We chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and Emil was with me the whole way. He really supported me when I had some health problems, and just want to say thank you, Emil. Good to see you're there. Okay, let's wrap it up, and maybe we'll do it again, John.
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Adios, amigos.